Welcome to the 2020 Texas Instruments VCE Mathematical Methods Term 3 Revision Series. This is part 4 of exam style questions, and we're going to have a look at widgets tonight. So you may ask, what is a widget? Well, a widget's pretty simple. It's a single page, a TNS document that is stored in the My Widgets folder. You've probably noticed that already on your CAS calculator in your file browser. So, and on this single page, more importantly, you can contain up to 4 CAS applications. What makes a widget so special? Well, of course, we're talking about exams, aren't we? So everyone says it saves time. That's the whole important thing. Now, as you're going through your exam practice, you can pre-prepare before the exam for repetitive style questions. So as you're going through that practice, if you see a question seems to be repeated, maybe it's suited for a widget. And the great important thing is that you can import it into any problem in a document, whether it's problem 1.1. If we have a look at the top of the page, I'm in problem 1 because it has 1.1 up there. And I'm on page 1.4 at the moment, and there was page 1.3 we came from. So what we're going to look at, and if you notice at the top of the page there, it now says 2.1. So we're now in problem 2.1. The main benefit of setting up problems is that when we're in problem 1, we define certain functions, and it's quite possible we use the same variables in the next question on an exam. So therefore, we put in a new problem. It's all reset back to nothing being defined. All right, so let's get underway at looking at our first thing. Now, if you remember, my colleague Peter, he was doing some of the last sessions, and one of the things he mentioned was the average value function. And he was talking about the notes page that he had that on, and he thought that'd be a good thing to do in this session. So here we are. We're going to have a look at the average value function. And we know that if f is a continuous function on the interval AB, then the average value or mean value of f on AB is given by the integral that is there. 1 on b minus a, the integral from a to b of fx dx. So this is our time. We are going to create a widget using the average value function. Okay, so let's get underway. We're going to put in a new page. So we're going to go new document. Control N is a shortcut that is quite often used, and we wish to add a notes page. Now, I'm going back to if you remember about the average value function, we had to define a couple of values that we had. Okay, there's our rule. So let's get back to our notes page. So we've got to do 1 on b minus a from the integral from a to b of fx dx. So to put in what's called a math box. So it's an equation box. So we can go menu, and there's a couple of ways we can do that. Insert and math box. And if we see there's a shortcut called Control M. We'll just press this button to disappear, but remember Control M. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in the variable A, and we're going to use the assign key, which is above the template, and we're going to just set that to 0 to start with. Now, I'm going to press Enter, and it will activate that variable A. And we see we have some blue input, and we have some green output there. We're now going to put in B. Oops. Go to B. And the assign key again. Now, it's better to use the assign key in here, not define. And let's just call B3. Okay, and we see it's activated. Now we're going to put in the rule, the function that we're going to put in. So let's just call that f of t. And again, the assign key. And let's use what Peter used last. I think it was something like 3e to, oops. There. 3e to, and he had a power, I believe it was minus 0.3t, And then all we have to do is press enter now, and it's done. And now what we've got to do is put in the formula for the average value function. And Peter had a great name for that, and it was called fave function average. So let's just keep that. You can pick whatever name you like for that. And we have to put in the variables A and B, which are connected to it. And if you notice, the variables come up as bold straight away. And we put B in, and we see that it's come up as bold also, which means it's predefined there. And again, we've got to use the assign key and our function template for division. And we're going to put in 1 and A minus B. Now, this is why it takes a long time to set these up. So this is why you set these up before you go in. Now, remember the integral template was shift and plus, and we now just fill in the values on that. A in the bottom terminal, a B on the top terminal, and then we'll put in our rule of F of T. So the whole aim is, as you're going through and doing your practice for exams, if you do see something that's really good in that, put it in. So it's done now. Now all we have to do now is evaluate it. So we can go var, see what we've got. We've got our function, average function there, and we just have to type in our A, B, and press enter. And there we have it. So the average value function for this rule that we've just sort of made up on the spot there, going on from Peter's last session, is that the average value from 0 to 3 over this function is minus 1.98. Now, the interesting thing about a notes page is we could go in and we could change one of these values in here. So if we change the 3 to, say, a 2, and you notice the green's gone, we press enter and it updates it. And we can see down the bottom that it's updated it for us, okay, to the new answer. It's there. Now, if I was making this myself, I'd probably say I'd remember it today, tomorrow, next week, but when it came to the exam, I might forget it. So what we can do is we can go put some instructions in there about what's going on, and we could put in a title, and it just works like a word processor. So we could call it the average value function. And it's best that you do this on the student software because there's a lot of typing you could do and fix up, and it's much better than doing on your screen, and then transfer your file to your handout. Now we might just say here, enter the values A, comma B, and it's up to you what you do, and you might say and F2 and put them in there. So we know what we've got to do. Put that in there. And one thing I like to do is when I come down to about this formula here, I like to just put in an enter and put a few dashes in so it says I'm only going to edit or touch the things or change the values which are above that dashed line. And then anything that is below the line will automatically be calculated from the CAS. Now it still looks rather nice, and there's a few things you can do to pretty it up, and I'll just show one of them at this point in time. And if we actually highlight this and do a right mouse click, which is control menu, we could change the color and change the color and the text color, and we might say we're going to have it as red. I could click it again, so right mouse click, control menu on the handheld, but it's best to do this on your computer software. And we could format the text. We could make it bold if we wanted to. So there's lots of ways that we can make things stand out. All right, so we've done our average value function, and at the moment all we have is the notes page. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make this a widget. Okay, so here we go. So we want to go doc, so we've got to save it to a special spot. And we want to go file, cancel that. I like how my touchscreen does that sometimes, doc, file, and we want to go save as, and we're going to scroll down to our My Widgets folder. And we're going to select our My Widgets folder. And we've selected it. And you'll already see there's a few things in there. And let's just call this the average value. Value and function. Okay, done. And we'll just save that. So call it a name that you like. So we've saved it. Okay, so let's get back to our other page now. Right, so we could close this off now and let's get rid of it, turn it off. Okay, it's no longer there. And I'm going to come back in here and let's move along. So we've created our widget. Now, before we're going to start, what I would like to do is create some sort of exam file that is there. All right, so an exam file. And so let's put in a new document, and I'm just going to make one change. I'm just going to do something here, so hopefully it won't close me down again. So let's just go Control-N, and there's our new document that we have there. And I'm just going to press Escape. Okay, so Escape. Now there's a function on here, or a place that a lot of you don't go to. It's Control and up arrow, which is known as the page sorter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy things. Now Microsoft commands all work here, so I'm going to go Control-C, and then I'm going to go Control-V. And when we talk about the exam, there's probably about 6 questions, but I'm going to put in a few extra just in case. All right, so I've got 10 problems there at the moment. So I'm coming back up to the top, and I'm going to go back to problem 1. Okay, so I've set up my exam file, and I'm going to just save that as well. And you could do that beforehand, or which is a good idea. So File, Save As, and let's just call it Exam. Okay, and it's just in my documents. All good. Now, let's get back to see what's going on. So we've created our exam file. Now, one good thing is, as you're working through an exam or any task, it's important that you regularly save your file, just in case you get that where it gets stuck. And if you have to press that reset button on the back, you lose everything you've done. So it's an important tip. Please save your work regularly when you're going through the exam. Okay, so we've got our question here. It's our question. So the amount of drug D in milligrams in the bloodstream at time T hours after it is administered is given by D equals 3e to the minus 0.2t, where D goes in between 0 and 3, inclusive. The average amount of drug in milligrams present in the bloodstream over the first 3 hours after it was administered is closest to which one of these. Okay, so we go to our exam file and we say, I think I've got a widget for this. So remember, I did press Escape so this comes up. So all I do is I hit the menu and I go to Add a Widget. And then I scroll down until we see our average value function. I select that and I add. Okay, so here it is. Now there's a couple of things that you notice which are a little bit different to what's before. There's no green. Okay, so all our formulas have been deactivated which are in there. Okay, so looking back at our question that we have our formula is 3e to the minus 0.2t, and we're going in between 0 and 3, and we're told to calculate over the first 3 hours. So we're going 0 to 3. So we go back to our exam file, and we're going to go through. Now to activate them, you can go, this is just one way you can do it. Okay, so you go into the formula box, you press Enter. We have to adjust this 2 to a 3, and then we press Enter. Okay, we have to change our formula, and our formula is 3e to the minus 0.2, so we go into the box and we can edit it. And again, do not forget to press Enter. Okay, now we still notice that the formulas that we said below that we would not touch are not activated. So what we could do is we can go Control A, which is the Microsoft command, select all, so Control A. And then we can go menu, and this is on the notes page, number 1, which is actions, and number 1 again is evaluate. And what it does is it turns on all the math boxes which were on that page. So you can either go in and inside the math box, update it, press enter, or you could select the whole page to start with and activate all the math boxes at once. Now we see down the bottom, we have our answer. And I didn't have to set up integral at all, and I just had to update the formula, update the lower and upper bound, and then scroll down the bottom and see what my answer is. So it's minus 2.26. So let's get back to our other file. So 2.26 was this one here, 2.26. There you go. So that's D. All right, moving along. Now, we've got a question 2 here. Question 2. Let G be the function such that the domain is R and the codomain is real numbers also. And we've got this cubic function, which is here, x cubed minus 3x squared minus 45x plus 8. We are to find the derivative. Okay, remember the theme of today is, have I got a widget to do this? And then we've got to determine the coordinates and the nature of the stationary points on the graph G. Well, if we look on the screen, here you go. Now, just on that other session that was done, I saw this was a really good slide or notes page to teach you how to do all this stuff, and it worked through it really well. And the only thing I've changed on this, so I've copied part of the calculus part that we did earlier on a few weeks ago, and all I said is please modify as much as you want, and the only thing I've changed on this is the top title, so nature of stationary points, and it goes through all the theory that we've got there. All right, so looking at it, put in your function. If you have to update it, you then go through, there's the derivative of the function that was set for that. You then solve the derivative equals 0 to find the stationary points, and we're looking at the zeros of the stationary points, so the x values of the stationary point are minus 4 and 2. There's also to see if you want to be in approximate values, is there? That's that x approx value, etc. And then you substitute the x values into the function, and they automatically come out with the y values. So we know our two stationary points for this example here are minus 4 and minus 88, and 2 and 20. And again, the approximate values are there. And then determine the nature of the stationary points using the first derivative analysis. So look back at the previous webinar on this to get a bit more detail of the explanation there. And now what we're doing here is we're checking by the sign of the first derivative, and it's been set up that you can pick the h value, which is how far either side of each of those x values you get, and then it tells you the gradient values over here. Okay, so you get the gradient values over here. And that's at the turning point, 0, 0. And looking down here, here's the gradient on just past it by going 0.01. And therefore, we could see by looking at the values, if we look at the first one, negative 0.18 going to 0 gradient, going to positive gradient. So negative to 0 to positive would be a minimum. So that would be a local minimum. And down the bottom there has the second derivative. Now, I think there's just one thing we could add to this to just make it a little bit better, and that would be a graphs page of this. So let's add a graph page. So Control and Doc adds a page. We're going to do a graphs page, and we're just going to look at the variables that are defined there, and we've got the f variable, and we'll just put fx in there, and there's our graph. Now, the one thing we notice is that it's not on the screen fitting. So let's just double click on those values, which is one way of doing it. You can go into menu and look at the window settings, but we'll just do this. And let's just say that that was 80 up there. See how we went. It's way too high, but we'll see what the bottom one is. And we'll just make that a little bit smaller. Let's make that 50. Now, that time I press enter. If I press tab, it goes to the one on the 10. That looks all right. If I press tab twice, goes to the bottom one. And I'm going to say, let's go to -100 on there. And if I press Tab twice again, it goes to the other one. And there we see the whole graph. So it agrees with what I said before, that this first turning point was, in fact, a minimum. All right, now, we want to turn this into a widget. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to go back to page 1.1. We're going to go to our doc. We're going to go to page layout, and we're going to group the two pages together. So it's Control 4. So number 7, group the two pages together. So we see them both on one page. We now have to save this as a widget. Okay, so let's go Doc and File and Save As. And again, I'll just have to do that again because of the touch screen. So File, Save, and Save As. And there's our thing there. And we just have to go down to my widgets. And let's go through and let's call this, there's our derivative test. And let's just put a 1 on that. So there. Okay. And let's make sure we're in that folder. Yep, there it is in that folder, and save. So it's saved. So we're now going to close off this file because we don't need it anymore. So I'm going back to here. Okay, here's our question. We're going to have to put this equation in here. So let's go to our exam file. And we're going to move along to problem 2.1. There is nothing on that. If I press the menu button, I'm going to add another widget. And we're going to scroll down to our function that we want. And this is our SP derivative and test 1 that we just made. Select that. And you notice that the pages are grouped together, too small. So if we go back to our doc and we go to our page layout again, and we go to, now number 8 says ungroup, we ungroup. Okay, we've now ungrouped them. It's all ungrouped. If we scroll down the page, we see there is no green on this time. And so remember Microsoft, we go Control A, select the whole page, then we go Menu and 1 and 1 evaluate. Everything's now turned on. We can scroll right all the way back up to the top of the page. The only thing we have to do now is change the rule. And the rule, just having a look back there, was x cubed minus 3x squared minus 45x plus 8. So we just have to now put that in our exam file. Okay, and as I switch from page to page, it's like you're holding the exam paper in one hand and you've now got your calculator up, and we just have to edit this rule. So I'm now going to edit that rule. So it was x cubed minus 3x squared, which is there, minus 45x. So minus 45x. And we have plus 5. So as soon as I press enter again, everything is updated. And here's my derivative. We can scroll down, and in this question, we have to find g dash x. So there's our answer here. It's there. And the next part was to determine the coordinates and nature of the stationary points on the graph. Okay, so it doesn't say anything about the sign of the first derivative. So we might say, oh, don't have to worry about that one. But if we scroll down, we see that stationary points are minus 3 and 5 are the x values, and there's our approximate values. And then if we scroll down a bit further on there, we see that the y values are 86 and minus 170. So the two stationary points would be minus 3 and 86 and minus 170 and 5 and minus 170. That's it. Now, if we just want to make sure we didn't want to go down and see with their maximum minimums, I guess we could first say, oh, it's a positive cubic graph, so I know what the answer is. Just as a double check, because we get a bit stressed out in the exam, I can see what those two stationary points would be here. And again, we could just change that value up here. And sometimes when the graph is very close to it, you may have to come and click on this one if you're going to do it this way, and then just press tab, and then we'll put in 100 there, which is there, and tab to the other one, and keep tabbing down and go to about -200 there, and we can see the whole graph. And that verifies that the first value that we looked at would be the maximum, and the second one would be the minimum. So we go back. So scrolling back, we see which is the maximum and the minimum that is there. So -386 was the maximum, and 5 and -170 was the minimum. Okay. So let's go back to our file here. So I hope we're all doing well out there. Now, just a few commands to remember, which is there. On the note page, Control-M is the shortcut for insert math box. Control-A selects all. Menu 1-1 is what we want to remember there. That activates everything on the page. And we've got Control-7 or 1, which moves to the top or the bottom of the page if we've got a lot on the page in our widget, or Control-9 or 3 is page up, page down. So just remember those. Okay, so strictly increasing and decreasing is next on our list. So if you remember, and so I'll just have a refresher on the first one. So the function y equals fx strictly increasing if on the interval x is an element of a to b, if for every element in that interval f of b is greater than f of a. Okay. So let's move on. So here we've got a question. Let our rule of f being the domain being R and the codomain being real numbers. Remember, the codomain is not necessarily the range. Okay. And we've got this quartic here. We are to state the values for which the graph of fx, y equals fx, is strictly increasing. So let's go back to our exam file. And we're moving on to question 3 of the exam, basically. So it's problem 3.1. And press menu, and we go to the widgets. We say, do I have a widget to do this? Oh, there's one right at the bottom there, strictly increasing or decreasing. There it is. So we add that in, and again, everything's turned off. And it looks a bit complicated in there. So we remember the commands, Control-A, select all, and then menu 1 and 1. Oh, yeah, it's turned it all on. And this time we see, oh, there's some interesting looking things there, something about point of inflection as we scroll up, stationary points in a nice little array there. We'll get back to that a little bit later. And for this function that's already entered in there, it gives you the answer. It's already updated. So let's just edit that with our portion we had. So we've got x to the power 4 minus 5x squared plus 3. It's there. So let's just edit our function. Let's type it in. So we want to put in x to the 4 minus 5x squared and plus 3. And we press enter to activate it. And watch what happens just below that. Do not change these rules line. Everything is automatically updated straight away. Okay, so it's all there. All good. And we can just go through and see that our answer will be for strictly increasing would be there. Okay, that's our answer. Now, something you'll notice there, as I click inside the math box, we get the blue bit that we had in the previous ones. Now, what I've done is I've actually hidden a lot of that because really all I want to see is the answers. I don't want to see the code that goes with it. So if I just click back in that box, and if I go menu, math box options, and math box attributes, we can see that there's a few options up here. What I've chosen for that box is that I've hidden the input. Now, I'm just going to go and hit show the output and then press OK. So what we see is there's our syntax that we've got. And if we had a lot of things on the page with all the syntax, it's going to look pretty full. And I'm going to have to scroll down a long way to get it, all the answers, to see where they are. Now, don't be too alarmed about this one. You'll be given a copy of any of the widgets that have been produced for this session, and they will go up on the share drive when the video goes up in a couple of days. couple of visitors stay. So give them 3 visitors stay. But you'll get access to it. So if I actually click on this, whoa, it looks a little bit messy. So that code's already done. It looks a bit fancy. So don't worry about that. You get this so you can use it. So there's a bit of code in there for you to use. So don't worry about that. And then this is just the zeros command, but we won't answer that question. So you only look at the bits that you need, okay, that are there. All right. So let's get back and see what our next question has to offer. So this time we have a test of 10 multiple choice questions, each with 5 alternatives for the answer. A student who has not studied for the test chooses the answers at random. Give all answers correct to 3 decimal places. Okay, there's a bit of information in there. So we've got 10 questions, 5 alternatives, and we've got the answer 3 decimal places. We have to find the probability that they get exactly 3 answers correct. So I am aware of the time. We have some widgets lined up to do the next this question and 2 more. So I'm sorry we've gone over, but we will continue with this, and let's have a look at what we've got. So exactly 3. So let's go back to our exam file. We're now up to question 4, and I press my menu. I go to add my widget, and we go down, and you may have noticed before there was something that was called Binomial, and we're going to add our widget in there. Now this time, look, right at the start I said you could get up to 4 different applications on there. So there's 4 applications. Now if you remember, we go doc. Now, maybe someone remembers the shortcut for that. If we don't, we have to go page layout, but there we see number 8 is ungroup, and it's Control-6 is the shortcut. Now, on this page, we have some information, and you can also add some information about formulas, the binomial formula. And this bit, I think, is one of the most important, because every time you do one of these questions and you've got your CAS, you've got to say what the distribution is, and you've got to define N and P. So it's giving you a reminder. So in your widget, you can put some reminders in as well. So just going back to the question, we had 10 questions. So just going a quick look back at the question, we had 10 multiple choice questions with 5 alternatives, and we had to find exactly the 3 answers were correct. So we go back to our exam file, and we had 10 multiple choice questions. So 10. And then press enter. Don't forget enter because it activates. We get that green for go. And then we had to change this. So if they did it randomly, that would be 0.2. And we get 0.2. Now, we're going to move along to our next page. Okay, so the next page is a spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet, what it lists is each of the X values that are possible. And then on the next column, it has the probabilities. So we're now at this one. Now, the question asks for 3 decimal places. So where do I change those 3 decimal places? Well, if you notice, I actually clicked on that cell, and down the bottom here, down the bottom, we get more decimal places. So to 3 decimal places, the answer would be 0.201. So there's the answer to part A, 0.201. All right, cancel that. And let's go back and see what the next part of the question was. Okay, find the probability that they get at most 3 answers correct. Okay, most 3 answers correct. So if we just scroll down a little bit, so again, we've got our binomial set up, and we're saying that we've got probability that X is less than or equal to 3. So let's get back to our exam file, and let's go to the next page. And remember, this was all done beforehand. So I'm scrolling up to the top of the page, and we've got some instructions. Edit only the lower and the upper bounds in the math box below. And this is the bit that's telling you these are the 2 numbers I've got to change. So it was being less than or equal to 3. So all I have to do now is, and because you've written these yourself or used them regularly, you know what you've got to edit. And I'm just going to change that to a 3, and I press enter, and there's my answer. Now, we've got an issue that it said 3 decimal places, so let's go through and see how we can get more decimal places. How would we do that? We actually go to Doc, and we go to Settings, and Document Settings, and we fix this number of decimal places. Float is significant figures, so we're just going to change that to 3, and press OK, and there's my 3 decimal places. So the answer to part B is 0.879. Okay. Go back. So that was part B. Next part. Find the probability that they get at least one answer correct, given that, all right, that's a bit of a hint there, that they get at most 3 answers correct. So just going down, looking at our solution there. So we've got conditional probability there. So we're going that X is greater than or equal 1, given that X is less than or equal to 3, and the intersection of those two regions means that it has to go between 1 and 3, and over that it'll be X less than 3. So let's get back to our exam file. And if we scroll down a little bit, we've got the conditional probability formula there already. And it's already set up with the syntax. And we just have to change the numbers in there. Yeah. So we're going to change them. It says was between 1 and 3. We put there, so we change that to a 3. And then we have to go between 0 and 3. It is in there. And don't forget, nothing happens until I press enter. Okay, so the answer to part C is 0.878. Okay, now don't forget we set this all up. We put some notes to remember a couple of the possibilities with conditional probability there. Okay, just to give us an idea. Now, this second one is interesting that it has just X equals A in the top there. So if we just got an X equals A, when we come down to our cumulative distribution, and let's say we just put the same number. So if this was going to be 3, 3, just X equals 3, we just put a 3, 3, and it still works out on the cumulative. So there's a little tip for you. Okay, back to our questions. Now, sketch the graph of Y equals, trig, one of our horrible subjects, or topics, I should say. And we've got to sketch this graph going in between minus pi on 2 to pi, labeling the coordinates of all stations with axial intercepts and endpoints. Okay, so we're saying, Chris, let's hope you've got something there in your bag of tricks. So, moving to our next problem. This is question 5. Oh, I forgot to mention, as an added bonus, we actually get the distribution of all the possible outcomes. It's a lovely little curve, isn't it? So, getting on to our next one, press menu. I think you got the idea now. We want to add a widget. And if we scroll down now, we're going to go to this graph restricted one. And we're going to add that one. Okay, and here we see that on the first side, this will be a notes page. On the right-hand side, we have a graph already drawn of a function. And we have to split that up. So if we remember, it's either control 4 or control 6, or 6 is the bigger number, so we want our view to look bigger, so let's go control 6. Done. And we just have to now, you have a choice. You could activate everything all at once, or you could fill in the functions first. Okay, so let's do activate it all at once. So control A, and then it goes menu, 1, 1. Okay, mid-game, we've got a nice little table of values. So scroll up, we use the control features to go up and down. Remember, to the top of the page was control 7. Now we just have to edit the function in there and put it into the appropriate one that we have. And it was 3. I'm just going to edit this to save a little bit of time. So it was 3 minus 3, and we've got the sign 2x, and at the question it was minus 6. So minus, and I'm going to actually type pi rather than use the pi button. So I'm going to type pi, and I'm going to say divide by 6. Divide by 6. Okay, so just double check we've got the formula incorrect. Yes, okay, and press enter. Okay, it says it's done. So there's our formula. Now you'll notice here that when I put in the domains or the domain bounds, I actually put a decimal point after the 1, and it gives me decimal places. So we weren't told about decimal places in this question. So when I put this in, I'm going to change that to minus pi on 2. So I'm just going to go divide by 2 and put that in. Okay, and we had to go up to pi. So I'm just going to put in pi, and we could use the pi button this time. And that's something with my touch screen. So let's go out of that, and I'll type pi. Okay, and remove the decimal place. There. Okay, and press enter, and there's our pi. Now let's just scroll down to what we get. what's in our bag of tricks of the preset. We know what the x-intercept is. We know what the y-intercept is straight away after we put in the function. We know what all the stationary points are for this restricted graph. And we even get the lower end point there, and we get the upper end point there, all defined. If we wanted a derivative, that is there also. And if we're working on the second derivative for whatever reason, that's there as a bonus. And there's some points of inflection if we want that. Now, if we go to our second page, there's our graph already done for us. Just one thing on that page. The 1. So I'm going to put in pi on 3, and I'm going to type pi divided by 3 and press enter. And we can put the pi scales on, so not a problem. And that's something that's lovely to do. So just you'll note you can change the 10 in terms of pi's as well. So we've got the shape of the graph, and by scrolling through, we can draw the graph, then label all the information by scrolling down this screen on our exam paper as we're doing it, and we'll produce a graph. So let's get back to see what's next in store for us. So there's our graph. Okay, now just be aware, this is a graphs page. I have typed these in using the text feature in the menu actions and text to do that, just to produce a nice answer for us. So they do not come up automatically. So all those nice fractional values have been done separately to that. You wouldn't do that on your CAS. Okay, that was just to show you the answer. And please, if we go back to look at the domain here, it was x was greater than minus pi and 2 and less than equal to pi. So I've also gone in and changed the attributes on that endpoint to show that it's an open circle. Be very careful with that. Okay. And our last and final question. A particle moves in a straight line so that its velocity in meters per second is given by the velocity equation. And given there, 3t squared minus 2t, with time being greater than 0. If the particle initially starts 2 meters to the right of the fixed origin, find the position of the particle after 3 seconds. Now, back to my exam file. And we go to the next one. And yes, there is a widget. So, scrolling down. So we started with the velocity. Now, this is a widget that my students at school, we developed this one and put it to them. So again, I'm going to go Control 6, which increases the pages there. I'm going to go Control A, select all, and then menu 1, 1. Okay, there we go. Now, everything's activated, looks good. Now, there are some instructions that you have to read. Do not include the domain, so please make sure, put in any instructions and you make your own, which is there. And I just need to put in the rule, which is 3t squared minus 2t is what we have to do. Okay, so 3t squared minus 2t. Okay, and press enter. Okay, that's activated that. So it's in there. Now, the other thing now, I had to change the initial condition. So at time t equals 0, press enter, don't forget that. You've got to get that green for go. And then for it was 2 meters to the right. So we're going to change the 3 to a 2. Okay, and press enter. Now if we scroll down, we see that we not only have replayed the velocity equation to make sure I've typed it in correctly, so we've replayed that. We've got a bit of how you do it in there, the integral, and there's our answer. So all you have to do is now copy down that x of t equals t cubed minus t squared plus 2. That's the answer to part A. And the other thing we had to do was work out the position after 3 seconds. So just looking down there, we could actually come into this math box here, and we know that our variable was x for position, and we had to work out, and don't worry about the color change that's there, put in 3 and press enter. And we know that we get 20. So the answer to part A is, what was its position after 3 seconds? It is 20 meters to the right of O. Okay, and just looking at the last part, when is the acceleration of the particle? 6 meters per second squared. Get back to our exam file, and what we can do is we will go, we've got to solve this, but we've got our equation. So just looking at when you're on a notes page, everything's there that what you're used to is now on the calculations number 6. So we've got algebra and number 1 solved. So they're all in the same order there. And we hit our var, and we've got our A there, and we wanted to solve A of t equal to, and it was 6 meters per second, so we're going to put in a 6, and we've got to put the variable comma t in there, and we press enter. So 4/3 of a second. So to answer that question, it would be the time of 4/3 of a second. Okay, so we're wrapping it right up now. Sorry, I've gone over time. It took a bit longer than expected, so I hope you've got something about. What's next is the question. Well, that's really up to you. As you do some questions and you see a repetitive pattern that is in there, maybe take a little note and say, I think I could make a widget out of that one. Okay, and as you do it. Now, the last thing, preparation and practice are essential. So if you borrow some widgets from someone, you've got to practice them. If you don't know how to use them quickly, then you're going to fall into trouble. And please check them very carefully, because occasionally you'll find there's something doesn't work that you try, and please take note of that. So I thank you for coming again. Year 12s, I wish you all luck with the upcoming exams under these trying conditions of COVID-19. So I wish you all the best, and I hope that you have a great rest of the year.